how's it going, friends? Thank you for tuning in to VR Revelations. It is the year of our Lord 2023, January 3rd, and we have more reports coming out of the situation, or rather the war that is taking place in Ukraine right now. So in my last video, I reported on the devastating attack that the Ukrainians carried out on a building where Russia was housing hundreds of recruits. It seems that they were celebrating the New Year, and it seems that even Russians are confirming now that these soldiers were apparently using their cell phones, contrary to the prohibitions that they had, and so the Ukrainians were able to use a system to track the cell phone activity, and they launched, according to reports, 6 Himars missiles. 2 of them were shot down, but 4 of them got through, and they completely obliterated the building, reduced it to rubble. Again, go look at my previous video, and you can see the footage there, which I went over. And yeah, it was just pretty much a smoldering heap of rubble. The Ukrainians were claiming that there was around 400 recruits in the building. The Russians initially said it was around 69, but they are now saying that that number has gone up to 89 soldiers. And again, this is being reported by multiple mainstream media news sources, as you can see here. 44 minutes ago, 8 hours ago, Russia now says 89 killed in Ukraine attack. So Russia is retaliating for that attack, and in that video I talked about how they were going to use this as a rallying point to garner support and to seek revenge and to possibly launch devastating attacks, possibly even use of small tactical nuclear bombs in order to mitigate the loss of life that the Ukrainians keep on inflicting little by little. Of course, the U.S. is involved in all of this, and the U.S. personally, I think, is preparing, or things are pointing to a future conflict between these major superpowers. So in my opinion, the objective of the United States is to inflict as much loss as they can on the actual physical Russian soldiers, so that when they do face off, the U.S. will have the upper hand. Unfortunately, the Ukrainians right now are having to bear the sacrifice of this. But again, that's what they chose. They chose to stand with the ideology of the West and whatnot. So, again, I'm not going to choose sides or get into a political debate on ideologies. I'm a Christian. I believe in the Word of God, and I think that all this is prophetic in nature. I don't think Ukraine is going to win this. I think they're going to lose this year. But this is not good. I do want to go ahead and take a quick look here just as a small recap before I read, on the attacks that Russia launched in retaliation for this, which I don't think is the full attack. I think they, something worse and big is coming. I think the Russians were already planning a large offensive. But the fact that, there's a public outcry for, the deaths of this many soldiers is only going to bolster that offensive that I believe they are planning. So let's go ahead and take a quick look here at Al Jazeera. They are reporting on this attack by the Ukrainians here. So as you can see, Russia now says 89 killed in Ukraine attack, blames mobile phones. Again, I went over this yesterday. This is just a quick recap. Russia's defense ministry has raised to 89 the number of its military personnel killed in a recent Ukrainian rocket raid on a school housing soldiers in Makiivka, in the Russian-occupied Donetsk region, and blamed the attack on unauthorized use of mobile phones by its forces. While Ukraine has claimed that about 400 Russian soldiers were killed in the missile attack in the first minutes of the New Year's Day on Sunday, Moscow had until Wednesday maintained that 63 Russian soldiers were killed. Russia's initial admission of 63 deaths was already highly unusual, as it marked the most significant loss of life from a single attack confirmed by Moscow since the start of its Ukraine invasion in February 2022. So again, we're almost going on a year here. since the conflict started. The number of our dead comrades has gone up to 89, and in the previous video I said at least it had to be 100 just because of the size of the building. And usually you get reports from both sides, and you can almost place your bet that it's going to be somewhere in the middle. Lieutenant General Sergei Zuyakov said in a video statement released by the Russian Defense Ministry early on Wednesday, the death toll was increased after additional bodies were found under rubble in the town of Makiivka, he said. And again, if you go and take a look at the video, it's, they collapsed the building, so I'm sure some bodies were completely disintegrated, so it's going to be difficult to actually, count all the dead soldiers. The use of mobile phones by Russian soldiers was to blame for the attack. So I do want to get down here because we have an interesting statement here by the Institute of War, who of course is pro-Ukrainian. It's like a Western propaganda site that is supposedly analyzing what is taking place in Ukraine, but they tend to make predictions and analyze the situation in a way that it favors Ukraine, right? And a positive outlook for Ukraine. And again, I don't blame them. You have these two sides, guys, and usually people are going to lean one towards the other, right? Democracy or, communism and whatnot. It's a Cold War, pretty much a continuation of the Cold War. So look what they say here. The Institute for the Study of War said that pro-Russian military bloggers had discounted the mobile phone explanation as a lie and accused the Russian command of being criminally negligent for failing to disperse its forces in smaller groups further from the front line. So, there's, pro-Russian bloggers that, are saying that it wasn't the phone. That's just an excuse of Russian generals for their careless management of the situation in the middle of a war, and that, they should have been aware that these troops were at a risk of a Ukrainian attack since they were in range of Ukrainian weapons. And so these commanders are trying to use the excuse that, these recruits who were celebrating were using their phones, and that's how the Ukrainians were able to locate the position. Again, you got to always kind of try to find something in the middle. It's probably both things have to do with it. It was a mistake by the Russian leadership there, and I called it out in my previous video that it was a blunder for them to house these recruits so close to the front lines where, Ukrainian missiles could reach them. And it was probably also a mistake that they were using their cell phones. But again, when there's an attack of a scale like this, the families and the people that are expecting better of the Russian, of their leaders are going to, look for people that are responsible, and they seem to be blaming, these commanders, these generals, this military leadership, but they aren't blaming Putin. And the Institute for the Study of War goes on to say here, such profound military failures will continue to complicate Putin's efforts to appease the Russian pro-war community and retain the dominant narrative in the domestic information space, the Institute said. So there you can see they're biased, right? They're pretty much saying, oh, this is going to damage Putin's reputation here and his justification for the war. He's going to lose support from the Russians. But again, that's wishful thinking. This is only going to infuriate the Russians and the populace. And they're asking for revenge now. And so bigger attacks are going to come towards Ukraine. And again, I think this year Ukraine completely collapses. And that's going to be on display for the whole world to see. And it's going to be up to the United States to push all their chips to the center of the table and go all in. And that's when the U.S. is going to reveal their true motives, because I think they are not willing to risk nuclear war over Ukraine. Unfortunately for the Ukrainians there, who have been, sacrificing their lives, thinking that the U.S. at some point is going to come in like a superhero and join the war directly. Again, a lot of wishful thinking going on right now. So yeah, let's actually jump here to the response of the Russians, which in reality I don't think it's the actual response. I think something huge is coming. something devastating. Again, guys, Russia could completely wipe Ukraine within minutes if they chose to. I'm not exaggerating. They have nuclear weapons. They don't even have to use their biggest nuclear weapons. They can use small tactical nuclear bombs. In fact, they can use huge conventional missiles to completely wipe out, Ukraine in the same way that the United States could completely wipe out the Canadian army or the Mexican army. That's just a reality. Why they haven't done it? Probably because, it's going to raise the tensions really high and increase the risk for the probability of, nuclear warfare. But I think at some point they're going to see that, the Russian people are going to ask, hey, if we have these weapons, why do we keep sending our, sons to die when we can annihilate the enemy? And so it seems that Zelensky is panicky here about a massive response, and I think rightly so, because I think it's coming. Russia has launched a powerful missile barrage in retaliation for the hundreds of dead Russian soldiers in Makiivka. The French watched live the destruction of a Ukrainian armed forces base filled with CIA MI6 agents and Himars and RM-70 MLR systems. So apparently, some French news source was actually holding a live televised report here when one of the attacks was carried out by the Russians here, and you could see the explosion in the background. Pretty much knocks the reporter off his feet, and the camera goes flying. So we'll be taking a look at that. Pretty incredible. But again, I don't think this is the actual response here for the attack. I think something much, much worse is coming. The bombing was broadcast on French television. A Russian missile hit the Man Hotel, while a second hit the ice palace known as the Ice Arena in Druskovka. A third strike followed against a railway station. Eyewitnesses reported a secondary explosion of ammunition stored at the base. All reports indicate that the Russians hit a gathering of Ukrainian military and Western military advisors. The attack was recorded live on a French TV channel. Today it became known that inside the destroyed building there were a large number of beds, an indication that they housed a large number of soldiers. So let's go ahead and take a look at this French report that was taking place live. You can actually see the reporter here reporting on the situation or the location, and then you see the people in the studio. There's actually an audience there when a missile strikes in the background, at this building here with devastating effects. So let's go ahead and take a look at this here.
Donc j'avais pas vu l'image. Paul.
So yeah, you can see that. Pretty shocking there to catch something like that live. Now, I want you to take a look at the face of this audience member here in the background. Look at this guy. He's like, oh my gosh, did that just hit the studio or, where the reporter was at? But yeah, pretty incredible stuff there. Usually doesn't happen, when a reporter is live. But yeah, we have more video here. In the aftermath of this attack here, you can see firefighters trying to put out the fires in the building. These are Ukrainian firefighters.
Переходи через парапет, давай на пластик сразу, сбивай пламя. Посольчик, помоги ему. Не-не-не, так не пойдет, ближе подходи к очагу.
Yeah, so as you can see there, they were trying to put out the fire there right after the attack. Um, the Russian military destroyed a Ukrainian echelon carrying Himars, so it looks like they destroyed some of the equipment there, some of the defense missile systems. Again, we have more footage here. It looks during the daytime. So these are the beds that soldiers were using there. So it does look like this area was housing Ukrainian soldiers. Again, you can see that the building is still intact in some places, as opposed to the attack that the Ukrainians launched, which completely reduced the building to rubble, which was a major building also. So looks like this missile might have penetrated the center of the building and then exploded inside. But it doesn't seem to be on the scale that the Ukrainians' attack was on. So that's why I don't think this is the actual response to that. Again, we're in the middle of a war, so technically everything is a response. But the Russians now have revenge on their mindset, and I think they're gonna start ramping up their attacks. They're gonna start using more drones, of course, more missiles, and the Ukrainians were already suspicious of a large-scale offensive, so I think this is only going to precipitate that offensive if the Russians actually, plan on launching it here at the beginning of the year, which personally I think they will. So again, you can see there that it left a ginormous hole there in the center of the building there. But again, it didn't collapse everything. However, if there were any people inside there, they probably died instantly. So, I can't say it's not devastating. Of course, any small explosion is devastating to anybody that's near it. Moscow officially confirms Himars' destruction. So again, the Russians are reporting that they destroyed, multiple defense systems there. So it looks like Zelensky right now is worried here about a revenge response, and I definitely think that it's coming, guys. I think that the Russians are going to respond in a big way, and I think a big offensive is coming. And things are not looking good right now for Zelensky. He is carrying out these attacks, sort of showing that the Ukrainians are capable of, inflicting massive casualties if they want to. But they're not launching attacks into Russia like Russia is, launching into Ukraine. However, every now and then they do. But I think that's sort of like, you getting into a fist fight with a bear, right? It's funny that I used bear because that represents Russia. But yeah, let's say you get in a fight with a bear. You know that if, you can punch the bear, you can do some damage to the bear. But you know that if you actually punch it, that's probably going to make it even more mad and make the situation worse. And the bear's probably going to go all in and just try to destroy you, right? As opposed to sort of just trying to, defend yourself and not agitate the bear. So because Russia is the more powerful military here, and because they haven't used some of their more destructive weapons, I think these attacks here, these devastating attacks that every now and then Ukraine carries out, are only going to anger the Russians more and are only going to make the populace support the war effort even more, as opposed to what the Western media sources are saying, that it's going to have the opposite effect, and people are going to, lose their, or that, Putin is going to lose the public support for the special military operation. I think they're completely misjudging the resolve of the Russian people, and it's completely contrary to history. I mean, just go look literally at every war. Most people gather behind their governments, and that goes without saying for Russia, who has a history, again, of being in conflicts with Napoleon and Hitler, and all these major wars they've had in victory. So again, this is a proxy war. This is a continuation of the Cold War. We have some shenanigans going on in the United States Congress right now with McCarthy waiting to be elected as the Speaker of the House and whatnot. But once Republicans do take, their seats in the House, I think, the support for Ukraine might slow down a little bit. But, I think that both parties are pretty much that's one thing they coincide on is their support for Ukraine. And I think the U.S. military sees this as a golden opportunity to deplete Russian reserves. Much like in the conflicts that took place in the Korean Wars and Vietnam, all these proxy wars between the U.S. and Russia, except since Russia is now directly involved, the United States is pretty much saying, hey, here's our chance to, send weapons to the Ukrainians, let them get killed, let them fight the Russians. As long as they're killing Russians right on their border, let them inflict as much damage to the Russians as they can. And then, when the Russians start using bigger weapons or, launch bigger offensives, then we'll just have to back out because, we're not willing to risk a nuclear war over Ukraine. I think that's what's going to happen, and I think it's going to be an embarrassment on the national stage for the United States and for Ukraine, besides the obviously terrible loss of life. But I think, internally, the U.S. military will try to see this as a victory because, again, it's like if Russia, was supporting Canada or Mexico in a war with the United States. They're going to be rubbing their hands like, yes, let's send weapons to Mexico. Let them inflict as much damage on the American soldiers as possible. And then in the future, when we get in a war, they won't have as many men. So again, that's why I'm saying this is just a continuation of the Cold War, guys. But eventually, we will have nuclear war according to Bible prophecy. But I don't think it's going to take place over Ukraine. However, I think that, the die was cast when Ukraine was sought to side with America and join NATO, and then when Russia invaded, this is sort of the beginning of what will eventually lead to, these two sides where it'll be America with their allies, Russia and China with their allies, and eventually, it will end up in a major global conflict, and that's why the truth is stranger than fiction. Anyways, leave your comments down below, guys. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Again, I don't mind if you support the American side or the Russian side, guys. My point of view is from a biblical perspective. I'm watching these events develop on the world stage, and I'm reporting on them because I think that this is all going to culminate in the biblical prophecies of the end of days. But again, there is hope in Christ. There is hope in God, who warns us of all these things, that we may be aware, that we may not fear, but that we may turn from darkness, from the ways of the world, unto faith in Him and trust in Him, that there is a Creator who created humanity, but because humanity fell and is corrupt, and men seek their interest, and men try to, implement their ideologies on different people, we have these wars and these things. And again, we oftentimes we see both sides justifying themselves and trying to make a plea or a case that, God is on their side. But according to biblical prophecy, all nations are rotten before God. All nations are corrupt. All kingdoms have to pass away so that God can establish His kingdom, a kingdom of righteousness, a kingdom of justice, where there is no death, where there is no corruption, where there is no selfishness and self-interest. So yes, make sure you pray for the innocent in Ukraine, for those that are looking for peace and deliverance, and for all people around the world. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.